Okay, action. It's Bryan here with Nick, and we're back. And of course, we're only back because you, the audience out there, have said, hey, give us another one. So we're doing this by popular demand.
Yeah, one of the things we really love is reading the feedback from yourselves on the blog, and some of you look enthusiastic to us. There are some others who are less enthusiastic, which always amuses me a lot more. We got accused of being a bit like Pol Pot, which I don't quite understand, but hey, there you go, what the hell. Okay, Bryan, take it away, talk to us.
Well, latest piece of news which I find interesting, a little gloomy of course, well we are on the gloomy side.
We're not.
Was Mervyn King telling us that the financial crisis is about to shift into top gear. And it kind of reminded me of a discussion I was having at a board that I serve on just a couple of days ago, where I said, look, I originally predicted a financial tsunami, now it looks like a financial Armageddon, but really what's important is that behind all of the financial decisions that are made, we have to remember that we have to have accounting as though people matter. So it's people in the end that are affected by the decisions.
Yeah.
And actually the whole issue should be that what's really important is not so much the accounting but the people.
Yeah, and it comes down to something which I find startlingly obvious, but we've actually put aside in because the numbers sound too big to us, and we say, they're going to bail us out for trillions and trillions of dollars in Wall Street, and you say, so what happens to that money? And you say, no one makes the sort of connection, which is that cash comes out of your pocket. You pay for it. And you've got to ask some very basic questions here. Accounting as if people matters. Well, we do matter, especially if we're being asked to pay the bloody bill for someone else. That matters to me big time. I never cease to be amazed by a little bit of an argument which you'll see all the time from people who live on the right wing, and I really don't care if you live on the left or the right wing. But they always go on about how the money which is taken in tax is taken away from them. It's their money. Well, yes, the money taken away from them to give to their mates is still their money. And bloody good thing. They make it feel really personal if it makes the buggers sit up and take notice. So I don't know how you feel about that, Bryan.
Yeah, well, how I feel about it is that I have to keep returning myself to some kind of idea or understanding of what democracy really is. And obviously in my democracy, and I think in Nick's also, majorities matter, but we have to look after, protect the minorities. And actually the third part of it, along with freedom of speech, of course, which is what we're exercising here, our right to free speech and to protest, is the sharing of the benefits.
Yeah.
And it just, seems to me that there is no reason why people should put up with the inequity that they've been having to endure. I guess, since the First World War, because actually basically what happened was you had a major world conflict, and that rolled into a depression, which then rolled into another world conflict because they hadn't resolved the issues of that depression. And really those financial inequities for the last 100 years have remained with us. Now, is something really fundamentally wrong if we have elected people who are claiming that they believe in democracy and there's all this inequity.
Yeah, and it's quite funny. I'm probably on a different wavelength to Bryan on this one, because I've never sort of equated democracy with, how shall we say, equity for people at all. If it was, we wouldn't have the people who sit down at the bottom of our economic scale, sitting on the bottom of the pile, out of work, out of everything. They wouldn't exist, because we would actually have done something about it to redistribute and make things happen. The bit which is really disturbing is that there are a vast number of us, in fact there's all of us, and we're all capable of doing work, yet only some of us do it, which is a rather ridiculous scenario, because if we spread the load and spread the gain, we'd all be doing a hell of a lot less and enjoying ourselves a hell of a lot more. I mean, it's pretty bloody obvious, and no one seems to have done that math. And what we tend to find we're doing is we're sitting there in competition with one another when we should be cooperating to share some gains. you know, that might sound slightly utopian, but really where I'm coming from is that we don't actually afford the things which are probably the most essential things in our society, the highest level. No one really gives a damn about the people who are looking after the, you know, the people in the old people's home. They just want bloody granny out the way and looked after by someone else at the minimum cost. We don't care about the guys sweeping the street, but we certainly want the street clean. We've got this appalling habit of actually putting people who don't actually contribute in a beneficial way on a bloody pedestal, rather than seeing them for the parasites and suckers they really are. So I might be being a little bit extreme there, and I do believe some people are probably worth a hell of a lot more than others because they're creative and they do things, but hey, we've got to actually understand that we're all in the same boat and there's various basics we need, and if we don't actually understand that, you know, our healthcare system, for example, making sure that's got money is a hell of a lot more important than bailing out people who've already got too much money. You know, we're barking up the wrong tree democratically.
Yeah, this business, we keep going back to this whole thing of socialising the losses and privatising the profits. And Nick talks about, you know, he has a different perspective on what democracy is, but it seems to me that in countries where you are proclaiming freedom, I think that it's absolutely essential. How can you be free if there's no equity? And it is outrageous that we have unemployment, and I think unemployment and the unemployment benefit, they both sort of go hand in hand in the sense that they're kind of like a negative tax. And basically what we need is a minimum standard of living, a guaranteed wage. Actually, we need a guaranteed wage for all. And obviously not all people in the kind of society that we're in now can be fully occupied, but they can be waiting to be occupied, being trained, ready to be occupied. And there shouldn't be any discrimination about that. So the basic fundamental value of the dignity of every human being is being ignored in a dreadful system that proclaims rhetoric which is quite contrary to that. So it's continuously, you know, pumped out the rhetoric.
It's full of contradictions. We talked about, was it Mervyn King? What was the name of the guy? He's the governor of the Bank of England, and Bryan showed me the footage before we started talking, and it had me rolling around laughing actually, because the guys are standing there proclaiming that there was a lack of morality in the financial markets in Britain, and that, you know, what they were doing was totally wrong and obscene and immoral. And I thought, yeah, okay. What's really happening here is that the game's been allowed to be played by people like yourself, Mervyn, with everybody offside. The referee's finally blown the whistle sometime towards the end of the game. The points are on the board, and the other side have lost because you buggers haven't done anything about it. Now, when the system is set up to allow people to actually cheat, swindle, take immoral positions, and do so with any great degree of impunity, they're going to do it. They're humans. I just find it bizarre that these buggers are trying to shut the gate after the horse has bolted, and we're left holding the bill, you and me. And I find that rather frustrating, and it makes me quite angry, really.
Yeah. So what we've ended up with is institutions that are self-serving. Basically they look after the vested interests, and instead of actually protecting the rights of individuals and those who pay the taxes, and at a local level here in New Zealand we pay rates, of course, which is the equivalent to a local tax. And we have a system where we say no taxation without representation.
Going back to Mr. Edmund Burke.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And of course, but that's become rather hollow sounding, because, okay, you'll be taxed and you can have someone who represents you, but it's not going to make any difference about the vested interests. Well, of course, you know, that's again fundamentally wrong, and it shouldn't be accepted. And there's nowhere where it says that all of this has to be the case. In fact, you know, the whole thing about policy, and I guess the good thing about it is that it's not set in stone, and so we do have the ability to change things if we will vote. And I just want to be a little bit more specific and down to the local here, going from the global, because we've got elections coming up pretty soon. And I think it's actually time that people actually stopped thinking about rugby and started thinking about the future of the country. Because postponing these important issues of who do you vote for, what kind of policies do you want, what sort of unemployment do you want, what kind of asset stripping do you want to continue with, do you really want to end up being totally enslaved to the bigger financial players on the global level, or are we going to actually go for something more local? And as Nick has said, and we've both kind of stolen it from E.F. Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, and his subtitled Accounting as Though People Matter, we have to actually get back to accounting as though people matter. And that can be done by your careful choice of who you elect at the forthcoming national elections for New Zealanders who actually care with a passion about their country. Never mind about the rugby.
It's really, there's something, I'll go back to the international, but it does relate to the local. I've been watching like a hawk the occupation of Wall Street. And what we've got is a large number of people, mainly young, but from all sections of society, who have converged on Wall Street and have, started up an occupation. They had a march in New York with 20,000 people, which through the financial districts, they're getting a larger and larger turnout, and the whole thing's spreading. They've kept the mainstream media out of there, and it's the thing we're all told how to think when it comes to elections. Here in New Zealand, we've got the papers tell us, John Key's this popular, therefore we must vote for him. And then you say, well, what the feck has he done? Absolutely nothing. It's a good photo op, so am I. I could do it. But, the thing which really gets me about these people in the mainstream media didn't know it was happening. It took them 2 weeks to realise it was going on before they would report it, and that was only because there were some clashes with the police. But the next question was, what do these people stand for? And this is very pertinent to our election here and any elections overseas. You don't always vote for what you stand for. You quite often have to combine together for what you stand against. And these people in Wall Street might have a million different ideas as to what they want, but the really key part is they're unanimous on what they don't want. They don't want a continuation of the sorry, sick casino which they see up there. There was a beautiful picture of a guy standing there, and he was saying something. He said, huge student debt, medical bills, where's my bailout? And what he's saying is, why are these people walking away with the cash when I don't get it? They're all united against something, and when it comes to our local election, we really need to decide what it is we want going forward, and actually look at the track record of people who are providing. It doesn't look very good, but what it does tell me is that the current administration which we have in this country is, quite frankly, no better than any administration we've had in the last 20 years. So it's basically a waste of space.
Well, I seen a message from a friend of mine. He's got a website called Madoodle. And on it, he actually, you can actually go and look at it, but he actually raised the whole issue of how we used to have bank robbers, and they would actually go and steal our money from the banks. And now the bank robbers are in the banks.
Yeah, they always have been, actually.
And they're stealing the money off us.
It's really bizarre, but we've protected the banks from robbers.
So, look, I know Nick and I can actually afford to laugh because we haven't been directly affected so far, although indirectly. By the bank robbers. But what we do want to do is actually say, look, on the bright side, we are very grateful to Facebook and to YouTube for being and for enabling us to actually have a platform and say these things which the mainstream media won't give us a look at. And it is quite interesting that Nick raised the whole issue of Wall Street and the protests, and of course I was talking about it a while back. And I see it's now starting to actually get through into the mainstream media because it's become far too widespread, the whole opposition, and it's actually spreading around the world. And so, I mean, the wonderful thing is that, we do have free speech, and we get it through, believe it or not, the contradictory institutions of Facebook and YouTube. Everyone's crying there. These are open to manipulation and abuse. But also, on the other hand, they enable us to actually say the things that we feel are important and we have a passion for.
And it's funny because on a more positive note, I suppose, to finish off with, you may get the impression that we want to tear down what we have. I think it's really important we protect the institutions which are very valuable to ourselves, but we're in a world now where Bryan and I will very much agree in terms of resources and in terms of what we have is that growth is not possible. In fact, we're going to go backwards. We don't have available to us going forwards the wherewithal to grow economies anymore on a constant basis. So what we're talking about now is not growth, but rebuilding our societies, rebuilding ourselves sustainably, and actually building a better world. We have a choice to do it. If we don't take the choice to do it, there's some fairly dire consequences, because the physical reality of this planet in terms of what it has available will force those upon us. So we'd like to be positive going forward to elections. Look at people who actually understand what is going to happen going forward, as opposed to the ones who want to promise you what you had yesterday.
Yeah, so now we're calling for a really honest marshal to come, because now the West is really wild. The outlaws used to rob the banks. Now they work for the banks, and the banks rob the people. So there's that wonderful little quote from Mr. Erskine Ewart from Madoodle, which is www.madoodle. Lovely little piece with lots of other political commentary on it and art. And we'll leave it there, and hopefully you'll send us lots of comment. We don't mind criticism, and hopefully
we like it.
You'll be constructive, because people who just say really awful, rude and offensive things, they might be shut on the door. However,
I actually repeat those to my chickens, and my chickens look at me and go,
so
that sums it up.
Okay, all the best.
See ya.